some news regarding Kevin Porter Jr., talented second-year guy. Cavs trying to get back on the court. Doesn't sound like that's going to happen anytime soon. Is a little bit of a blow-up between Kevin Porter and the front office, really. Take me through what you know and how this is expected to play out.
Well, how it's going to play out, Dave, and I appreciate you having me tonight, is the Cavs are going to move on. It's just a matter of when and if, and how it gets done, right? It's no longer a matter of if, I should say. It's how it gets done and when it gets done. They're going to try and trade him. They've been trying to take calls on KPJ for the last, I would say, 24 hours or so after the incident Friday night. But it wasn't just one incident on Friday night. This is a history of bad behavior. Unfortunately, he's been away from the team to address his personal issues. Everything that I was told is he wasn't doing the things that the Cavs wanted him to do during that time that he was away. And it's just a sad, unfortunate situation, not just because he's a talented player and he was somebody that the Cavs once looked at as a potential franchise cornerstone, but it's sad for KPJ because this is somebody who, was starting to spiral this past off season, making poor decisions away from the court. He was somebody who came into the NBA with a lot of questions about his maturity and the decisions that he would make off the court. And that was always the primary question with him. And that's why he slid to the back end of the first round. And here we are, beginning of 2021. And the number one question that the Cavs and other teams are going to have about KPJ still lingers today. And it's whether he can ever reach the talent that he has because of him sabotaging every single opportunity that he's had to this point.
So the reports are that he was upset his locker was moved for one of the guys they acquired, got very vocal about it. Then Kobe Altman tried to calm down and got into it with Kobe Altman. Are those accurate from what you were being told as well?
Yeah, and the way that it was termed to me from a source was a petty outburst that made everybody in the locker room uncomfortable. I talked to a player that was there for that heated altercation, that heated verbal exchange between Kobe Altman and Kevin Porter Jr. They said it was really, really uncomfortable and they had to leave because they didn't want to be a part of that. So, you never want those kinds of things to happen, obviously. The fact that it was the general manager, Kobe Altman, and he couldn't calm KPJ down, and the fact that head coach J.B. Bickerstaff heard it as well, obviously that did not help Porter's. That did not help with anything when it comes to Kevin Porter Jr. Those two guys, J.B. Bickerstaff and Kobe Altman, are two of the guys that have tried to help Porter as much as possible. They are the ones that have invested a lot of time, effort, resources into helping him. And when neither of them could really calm him down in this kind of moment, that was obviously a bad sign. And again, it was the culmination of everything that has happened with him over the last couple of months, over the last, I would say, about year and a half, things along those lines. I think the Cavs just felt like, enough is enough here. We can't do this anymore. The juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
And when you look at what he's done on the floor, though, he was a guy, as you mentioned, he flashed. He has NBA talent, and put up some impressive numbers. But the question is, can you keep him from hurting himself, as you pointed out, when he's not on the court? And in the off season there were multiple issues, but those are some impressive statistics from him in 50 games last year. He could play.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, Dave. I mean, I think any way you look at this is a setback, a minor setback for the organization's rebuild. At the end of last year, there were players in the locker room, there were members of the organization saying he was the one. He was the most talented of all the young guys, and that included Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, Dylan Windler. And there were a lot of high hopes for him coming into year two, trying to build on what he was able to accomplish in his first year in the NBA after being the 30th pick in the first round. Those are the kinds, when you hit on those kinds of guys, Um, those are things that change the trajectory of your franchise. But unfortunately, despite the work that the Cavs have done with Kevin Porter Jr., despite all of their efforts to try and get him reintegrated into this organization, it just hasn't worked. And it's sad. It's unfortunate. One player I talked to earlier today said, hey, look, how are we supposed to help him as an organization if he doesn't want to help himself? And this doesn't make excuses for him, but there is a lot that KPJ has gone through his entire life. Mm-hmm. And the Cavs have hinted at it, and they've talked about it. And Kobe Altman has even said a few different times, hey, he's a good kid, he's got a good soul, but he grew up in chaos. And that's the truth of this. And again, it doesn't excuse any of it. But he's a 20-year-old kid who has had a lot thrown at him in his life. He grew up in Seattle, a very, very tough area. It got to a point where he moved his family here to Cleveland with him, Dave, so that they could be safer. Unfortunately, everything that I have heard is that people that he has surrounded himself with are bad influences on him as well. And he feels a lot of pressure to help his family and get his family in a safe environment. And that's a lot to throw at a 20-year-old kid who has a lot of things that he still needs to figure out himself off the court.